It's not genius in sales, it's consistency and follow through.
Mm-hmm.
If you do these simple 7 things, or if you answer these questions, you have an 89% chance of closing and doing very well. So everything we do is based around simplifying.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today, it is my absolute delight to have an old friend on. And by old, I don't mean he's an old friend. I mean, we've known each other for a long time. And we're both old. So Ron Hubsher, who runs a practice on sales negotiations. And he and I have been chatting for many years about negotiating as a primary component of the selling process. Ron, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Ron?
Oh, Lee, thank you for asking, by the way. And just kind of in a nutshell, I'm a sales guy and engineer. That's all I do. I try and put engineering principles to sales. And just like sort of in engineering, you want to have consistent, if you think about sales as manufacturing a sale, you want to start out with good raw materials. You want to work it through a process, and then you have a high likelihood of having a great outcome. Mm-hmm. And the same is true with sales. You want to work on qualified opportunities. You want to bring it through a process, so you have a high probability of closing and creating a great long-term customer. Mm-hmm. With sales, it's a little different because you can't control everything in the process. There's other people on the side. They change, they move. It's dynamic. But if you use consistent, repeatable processes and consistent, repeatable best practices, you generally will get much better results.
I agree with you. So why have you focused on negotiation as your area of expertise in helping the sales community to perform better?
Yeah, so I always think it's kind of interesting. So if you ask a lot of salespeople how many times they've taken sales training, a number will raise their hand. They've taken all different kinds. There's question-based selling skills, which are great. Mm-hmm. There's opportunity management. And less people have taken negotiation training, so it's underpenetrated. And negotiation is a big word. It's like saying, hey, I'm good at math. Mm-hmm. Well, what does that mean? Are you good at addition, subtraction, calculus, differential equations? There's all different types of mathematics, and the same is true of negotiation. One type of negotiation is conflict resolution. So how do 2 parties at war come to peace? Or how does a labor union negotiate with a corporation? Or how do you deal in a hostage situation? And the key thing there is both parties have to deal with each other. Mm-hmm. If you don't come to a conclusion, bad stuff's going to happen, right? In the case of the labor union, they can go out and strike, or the company could shut down the factory. In the case of a war or ongoing hostilities, if you don't come to a conclusion, bad stuff's going to happen. And that's a very different negotiation than a business-to-business sales negotiation, where you want to win the deal, command a price premium, and create a great long-term customer, and they can stop negotiating with you for any reason.
Right.
They can go to one of your competitors who look just pretty similar to you, or they can opt nothing. So very different than conflict resolution, where they have to negotiate with you, like you're the only game in town. Mm-hmm. And another form of negotiation is sort of spot transactional negotiation. How to beat a street vendor out of $15. There's no sales process up front, and there's no legacy on the back end. You may never do business with them again. And again, that's a very different kind of negotiation from a business-to-business sales negotiation, where you want to win the deal, command a price premium, create a great long-term customer, and overcome status quo when they have the option of doing nothing. So what's actually interesting is we found that no one really studied business-to-business sales negotiation. They're using conflict resolution or hostage negotiation tactics, which is kind of like putting a square peg in a round hole. And what's interesting is if you use business-to-business, even though it's not, the consequences may not be as dire, the complexities are much greater in a business-to-business sales negotiation. Mm-hmm. So if you use a spot transactional or a conflict resolution approach to business-to-business sales negotiation, you'll often do more harm than good. However, if you learn a business-to-business sales negotiation paradigm, it's backwards compatible, so you can use it with conflict resolution and spot transactional negotiation. That makes sense, Lee?
It does. So tell me what the primary difference is. I get the distinction, but what's the difference kind of at the ground level?
The most basic is you want to have people who want to negotiate with you, right? You want to put a superlative sales effort in. So think about, I'm a big fan of you begin with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. So if you know what the end is going to look like, you start selling better in the beginning, right? So everything that you do in your sales process will show up in your negotiation. So when they squeeze you, you won't be able to sort of reflect back value. Lee, you mentioned if we did this project, we're going to save your company $5 million a year, $6 million a year. Each month of delay is $500,000. Or you mentioned this, Lee, you really need to put this program in place because otherwise it'll become uncompetitive in the marketplace. And that's worth your whole corporate strategy. So everything that you do up front will show up in your negotiation if you don't do it correctly.
We've talked about planting the seeds in the past, that negotiation isn't a standalone, separate component of selling, right? You don't say, okay, now we're in chapter 7 of our relationship. This is negotiation. everyone to their side, right? It starts with the very first words of engagement, and even before, of how are we going to interact with one another? Am I going to be focused on my customers' business outcomes, or am I going to be focused on me winning? I had another podcast guest on, Jeff Lipsius, and he said, the goal of selling is not selling. The goal of selling is buying,
Mm-hmm.
right? If the customer doesn't buy, you haven't sold.
One of the best definitions I've sometimes I'll start a class. What is selling? And I always think one of my favorite definitions is help creating an eager buyer and making that person really eager to buy. You're not really you're not the object. You're not the subject. It's that buyer. Are they eager? Are they excited? They see the value on a business and professional level.
Yep.
So I always think selling is creating an eager buyer.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a different way of saying the same thing. I see that. And so aligning with the buyer's goals, their needs, their requirements, their language of value, helping, bringing a business value hypothesis, what you create is a relationship of trust, potentially a relationship of respect, a relationship where there's give and take. And then negotiation is less about I win, they lose. And instead it's how do we get across the finish line together?
Yeah, and the way I frame it, Lee, is everyone has a business agenda, which I'll tell you in a room full of 8, people. We have to increase productivity, we have to increase sales, whatever it might be, reduce costs. We'll tell you that in a room full of 8 people. And then there's a personal agenda. It's like, this software issue is keeping me up on weekends. I don't get go home to coach my daughter's basketball game, or it's really cutting a strain in my personal relationships. I want to make sure this gets implemented. I get the corporate gold star so I can move ahead in the organization. So you want to know both the business reason and the personal reason. And what I find really interesting is the business reason people will tell you right away in a room full of 8 people. You can be in a Zoom call with 7 people. When you want to learn more how it's personally affecting them, like Lee, your favorite activities are, the following, right? And we're going to allow you to do those things. I want to go skiing every weekend. I have a beautiful summer house. I want to be able to get to that. And those are one of the great things about Zoom is, and like today, we can look into your house, right? We can see exactly what you're like, and you can learn about people's personal agenda, what they really like, what really, excites them in life.
You can see what I'm reading at between calls.
Very educated person, right? So we can have a great conversation. What are your favorite books? What inspired you? What book should I read? Right? What book would you like? And you really get insights into what really makes someone build connection and what's their personal win. So if you're just talking about their business win, you're no differentiated than the other 3 or 4 vendors. Your product is probably, if any kind of semi-mature market, your product is not going to look. It's very rare where you're saying, look, we got round wheels and they got square wheels.
Right.
It's like, look, okay, that's obvious.
Right.
If you're in that situation, sell the heck out of it. Someone's going to catch up pretty quickly.
Yep.
It's how we're going to make Lee successful, lower his business risk and personal risk, and make him look great in the organization.
It's funny you mentioned that about the personal side. I've actually been in selling situations where a CIO has said, if your product requires my team to learn new stuff, that's a non-starter.
Mm-hmm.
I have a small, and I'm reciting this from memory. I have a small team. They're already stretched pretty thin. I'm not taking their evenings and weekends away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a barrier to the sale. And that's not something you overcome in negotiations.
Exactly. And in fact, you want to use that as a differentiation, right? During your sales process. Great. And this actually, Lee, this is really applicable across the board, because in what organization does anybody have extra spare time? I mean, we are all stretched to the gills.
Right.
How are we going to save you time, right? And lower your risk? So yes, for every hour you invest, this is going to work out perfectly. We're not going to waste any of your time. And by the way, Lee, when you turn the light on, so to speak, when you get your team trained, when we get this thing installed, it's going to work correctly and even better than you even imagined.
The promises of the future. Ron, I have to take something back. It's been gnawing at me since I said it like 4 minutes ago.
Okay.
I said when we together cross the finish line.
Yep.
Most salespeople think of the signing of the contract as the finish line, and hence my statement around that. For the customer, that's the start line, right? They might spend 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, 12 months, even looking at a complex product or solution. Then they're going to implement, and that implementation probably will take as long as the selling cycle, maybe longer. And then they're going to live with that implementation for years. So many customers are really focused on what happens when I say yes. And the salesperson's primary focus is, I just want to get to yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a mismatch there. And this is a reminder. This is a public service announcement. This is a reminder that the customer's activities start when the salesperson's typically ends. So if you're just selling to that conclusion, if you're selling to the sale, you've already lost. If you're selling to a successful implementation and value realization, you have a shot at winning.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing. It's sort of like, how are we going to make this successful for you, Lee? I could sell you SaaS software. I could sell you anything. But when
Go ahead. Try, Ron. Go ahead. Just try.
Yeah. But when it lands at how are we going to make you look great? How's this going to work? How's it going to benefit your organization? And along the sales process, you want to talk about, here's other customers just like you, whether it could be the same industry, same title, same position. Here's how they've enjoyed success. Here are some references I'd like you to engage with. I always think, to me, it's very interesting. The differentiation in products is not on the product itself. It's not, I'd overuse term feeds and speeds. It's typically how we're going to make this a success. It's the we and the us, not the product.
Right.
So what's the white glove service that we have? Or what's our implementation process that's going to look like that's going to make this successful? So, features, advantage, benefits. I mean, that's so like selling a can of soup, right? This is like, here's how we successfully, we have a 99% success rate with companies just like yours. I want to, and by the way, I can't afford to screw up yours because I don't want to mess up that rate.
Right.
We have those are the things we want to talk about. Oh, and by the way, here's our implementation team. We have a team of experts who's so familiar with your industry, whether it's finance, SaaS, technology, whatever it might be. So I always think you're selling the we, not the product.
Right.
And how the we is going to help you. So I always think about that.
Right. The product can be duplicated by the competition. It can be replaced by the competition. The we is unique. The we brings specific expertise, specific learning, specific customer intimacy, customer knowledge that helps that customer to be successful. And that's what's going on in the risk analysis part of the customer's mind, either consciously or subconsciously.
Understood completely. Couldn't agree with you more, Lee.
What's changed over the past few years, Ron? I know that selling has changed. In the Jolt effect, the selling environment has changed dramatically from the in-person, face-to-face, salespeople providing information to today's customers know far more than we do, and they want to be more efficient. So what's changed in the negotiation space?
Yeah, so I would say everything and nothing. So the fundamentals have not changed. The fundamentals of sales have not changed. What's changing and continues to change is the turnover rate of people, right? So when I first started my selling career, a VP of sales might last for 2.5 years max. Maybe it's down to 1.5 years. Maybe it's down to a year. But that has always been going that way.
Yeah.
The number of people on the team seem to usually increase. And if you have a decision-making team of 5 and they're spinning over quickly, it really makes the idea that you have to be more precise.
Right.
The idea that you provide product information, I mean, that's sort of been outdated for 20 years. And even those people, no one cares about the product information. Your product is not that differentiated. Unless square wheels and round wheels and find me a situation, I'll sign up, man. Find me a square wheels, round wheels. I'll sell the heck out of that.
Yep.
So it's never, if you think your primary information was to deliver product information, you've been wrong for a long time. So that has not changed. I always think there's a wonderful quote, Lee, and this goes back. Are you familiar with Stanley Tool Works?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
They used to be based up just outside Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, this is very old, but one year, the president or CEO of Stanley, he held up a 1/4-inch drill bit. And he goes, can anybody guess how many 1/4-inch drill bits we sold last year? And someone, hundreds of millions or whatever the number might be. It's some crazy number. And he goes, not one person wanted a 1/4-inch drill bit. You know what they wanted? A 1/4-inch hole.
Yep.
Right. So if you're talking about your drill bit, no one cares.
Right.
Oh, what are you doing it for? We're building 100 houses.
Right.
Oh, so it's really important this is durable. And what happens if you don't build those 100 houses? We get hit with massive penalties and fees.
Right.
Oh, wow. So it's really important that you have enough of these things on site, on stock, right?
Right.
That's how we're going to deliver to you, right? We're going to make sure you never run out of drill bits, and we're going to have the best drill bits for you. Or maybe you're hanging a TV. Oh, okay. Tell me more about that. You need wiring. You need this. You need that. Here's how we're going to have someone come right to your house, hung that TV. So and you're inexperienced at this, right? We've done this hundreds of times, right? You're worried you're going to knock it over in those things. So if you're selling the drill bit, you're not doing much. And that hasn't changed. It really has not changed.
Yeah, it's not the thing, it's the value of the thing. Nobody needs a box in the kitchen that sucks up electricity and makes air cold, right? What they need is food that doesn't spoil.
Exactly. So I always think everything and nothing. So the fundamentals have not changed. When I hear, something's new, I always differentiate new to you.
Yeah.
It's different than new to the world.
Right.
And that's always sort of talk about when people say, it's new. What's continuing the trend? Cycle times are more people involved, shorter lifespans of people. So you have to be more precise. And I think even though we don't like Zoom, it can be one of the greatest competitive advantages you ever had.
Mm-hmm.
You can take someone, I could rarely, if ever, say, can I get 15 minutes of your time in person? Right. Or you have to drive out there, or you have to do something. Now I'm getting 15 minutes of your time in your house with your dog, where your trophies are, where your kids are running around, where your acknowledgments and your interests are right on the wall. Right. So I have the ability to develop a deeper relationship and ask you questions that I would have no idea about. If we're in a sterile conference room with 4 other people, like I really can't find out what Lee is all about.
Yep.
Now I can say, hey, Lee, that was really interesting. Do you have 15 minutes for a Zoom call? Hey, send me a Calendly link, right? And now Calendly can actually, right? Boom, set a meeting and just say, hey, Lee, man, just had a question. You mentioned this. You mentioned, something was really frustrating to you. Mm-hmm. Please tell me more about that.
So that's interesting. I mean, I agree with you that everything's changed and nothing's changed. Everyone's going gaga about over AI today, and they go, AI is new. It's like, well, we were implementing AI in the 80s, so it's not that new. You and I were talking about the distinction between discovery and negotiation. Let's talk about discovery. Ron, how do you define discovery?
That's a great question, Lee. I never really thought about it, but it's really understanding your customer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think it's asking questions and listening. And we just delivered a training and with some really experienced salespeople. And we say, how would you measure a good sales call? Right. And I think there were 2 metrics that we really settled on. One is, are they interested enough to have the next call with you? Right. Mm-hmm. So that at the end. And 2, what percentage of the time did you spend listening versus asking questions?
Right.
And I'm a big believer in 95% listening, asking questions, 5% talking. Mm-hmm. Someone else said, 75-25, but it was well past. It was like 85 to 90% listening and asking questions, right?
Right.
And if your product telling you're losing, and you can always just stop and ask, hey, how does it fit with your ideal world? Oh, well, that's perfect because of this, or this is terrible. So it's really understanding your customer, both from a business level and a personal level. And then thinking how we're going to work together. So there's certain band questions, everyone says band's dead. And it's like, you've never sold enterprise or big ticket items because, you're selling some cute things. That's very good.
Yeah. Let's start with budget. If I find budget, we've already lost. BANT, the B in BANT budget. If I find budget, we've already lost. That means someone else has already set the budget.
Yeah. I always think you want to talk about pain, mm-hmm. Business and personal value to them. Then you can go into the other things of how we're going to work together to get this thing solved, mm-hmm. right? Who do we need to get on board? What obstacles can get in the way? When's the ideal time frame to get this thing going, mm-hmm. right? And then we're going to walk back and say, oh, shoot,
right.
You need this by, let's say August 15th. Well, we're going to have to get people configured, trained. We have to go through legal. It's going to take 2 months. Let's make it 4 because those guys are always busy, or those women are always busy, right? So your decision cycle gets really compressed. Mm-hmm. By the way, Leah's here, right, to help make sure this thing is perfect. We have just the implementation team who can handle this. All these things that tie their critical needs. Once you understand their critical needs, really, really align to it.
Yeah, early on in my career, I saw discovery as defined as, let's ask a bunch of questions so we know how to scope our proposal. Mm-hmm. And no customer wants to sign up for that. Today, I define discovery as a facilitated process where we bring expertise to a particular area, particular problem to solve, and we want to facilitate the customer's journey through their education, through their increased awareness that problem is solvable and that there are ways of solving it and it can be done expeditiously and to their benefit.
I love it. I often think of sales as therapy, right? Mm-hmm. So you're letting them to talk through their problems.
Right.
Right. And oftentimes they're really talking through it with 3 people in the room or 2 people in the room. It's like, oh man, this is a bigger problem than I thought.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that. Oh, wow.
Right.
Right. So you're allowing them to self-discover by asking the right questions.
Right.
What the issues are. Hey, what would be the value of solving? Oh man, that's a bigger issue than I even realized.
Right.
It's affecting ops. It's affecting sales. It's affecting us all. Okay, man, this is huge. We got to get our hands around this. Thank you for helping us self-discover this.
Right. The other issue with that traditional definition of discovery is you're either in it or you're not. And the newer definition of discovery, anytime you're talking to a customer, you're in discovery.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. It's a discovery conversation, and it's allowing them to discover themselves. Right. What I often find is interesting is there's a thing called premature elaboration where I know that we can solve that. Oh, you have a pain, right? Your elbow hurts.
Right.
I can put a Band-Aid on that.
Right.
And that's the exact wrong approach. It's like, tell me more. What else? the way I think it's therapy is for many customers, you've heard the same issues
Right.
1,000 times. Don't rush to prescribe the solution. Oh, I got a drill bit for you. You need a hole. I get a drill bit.
Right.
What are you trying to do? How bad is that? When do you need? How many holes do you need?
Right.
What happens if you don't fill these holes, right? What downside? Oh, we're going to lose a contract, or it's going to cost us penalties in building houses, or whatever those things might be.
Right.
It's all discovery. I mean, it's all self-discovery.
Yeah. And just to elaborate on that from a selling standpoint, a customer may not be motivated to solve a problem until they're aware of the pain, until they solve the pain, right? If I'm shopping for a new dentist, I might go spend some time looking at profiles online and seeing who went to which dental school and seeing if they take my insurance. And, I might pick that up again next week and so on. But if my tooth really hurts, I'm going to drive myself to the first one on the map, walk in and go, how quickly can you see me? I'm not going to go read their diplomas and see where they went to school. It's like, I have pain now, fix it. So at some level, and I mean this in a positive way, we want to help the customer explore that pain. And if there's no pain, there's no pain. If there's pain, we want to clarify it and see if they want to address that pain.
Allow them to self-discover. Again, I always think it's just like therapy. And I've always gone by, there's a wonderful book I read when I was young in early my sales career. And I forgot the name of the book, but what always stuck with me, if you say it, it's BS. If they say it, it's the truth.
That's right.
Right? So you could say, hey, if you solve this thing, would save you $6 million. Yeah, Lee, you're full of BS.
Right.
When they say it, hey, I didn't realize the problem was bad, man. If you had an estimate, what would this cost? How much are you losing? Man, we're losing, got to be $12 million a year. $12 million, man. What's that a month?
Right.
Right? $1 million bucks. Holy crap. When do you want to solve this? Oh, man, how do we got to solve it? As opposed to say, hey, do you know you're losing $12 million a month? You're like, oh, okay, yeah, right.
At some level, it's the Sandler technique of going negative.
When with that.
Yeah. So the Sandler sales technique, Sandler is not really an enterprise sales approach, but I like a couple of their techniques. One is the upfront contract, which if someone asks you for something, you ask for something back, fairly straightforward. The other is going negative. If you're at a bar and someone's leaning into you and talking to you and they want to get to know you, you're going to lean back, right? Just naturally, physically, you're going to move back. Same thing in sales. If a salesperson comes up to you and says, this is absolutely the right thing for you, you're going to go, I don't know about that. On the other hand, if you go, well, I'm not sure this is a good fit. Wait, tell me more.
Yeah. You could always say, I'm not sure if it's a good fit or not. I always love that. I always think of more of therapy. I'm just here to help you self-discover. I'm not playing like any games or tactics. I'm just like, hey, what's it worth to you? What's the pain? Is this worth solving? You tell me. And you don't want to be leaning in their face. You want to be listening, right? You just want to be attentive listening.
Yeah. And that alone differentiates the salesperson from 80 or 90% of their peers who are gung-ho on proving that their thing is the best thing since sliced bread.
My drill bit's so much better. It's got a shiny edge. It's forged out of tungsten steel.
Yep. Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah. And it's got a shiny coat on it.
Yeah. And the customer looks at you and says, and the other guy in the lobby has a 400 mile per gallon carburetor he wants to sell me.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. It's not what I always say, are you selling the drill bit or are you selling the hole? And if you don't know anything about the customer's hole, you don't know about their problem. What's it cost to not have that hole get in correctly? What's your business risk? What's their personal risk? If that TV falls off the room, my wife or my husband is going to think less of me. Oh, exactly. We got to get this right. In fact, I can have an installer come in tomorrow, have this up, and you can watch the Super Bowl. Just sort of as an example, in a non-enterprise example.
Right. So, Ron, sales expertise development is both an individual sport and a team sport, right? So when you have a team playing, there are people on the sidelines saying, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. That was great. Do more of this, do a little bit less of that. In sales, sometimes you have some of that. In many cases, you've got a salesperson out on their own on a Zoom call, and there's no one looking over their shoulder to make sure they're doing it right. How do you ensure in your practice that your training, your coachings stick?
Yeah, and Lee, thank you for asking that, by the way. And one of the things that I always think is really important, it's not genius in sales, it's consistency and follow through. Mm-hmm. So if you do these simple 7 things, or if you answer these questions, you have an 89% chance of closing and doing very well. So everything we do is based around simplifying, not complexifying. Everyone likes to think they're smarter and better. And, I've got Lee, this is a new way of selling. oh, this
Yeah.
is it. No, it's really just listening and asking questions. So we have discovery questions.
Look, selling hasn't changed since Satan said, "Hey, take a bite of this apple. Go ahead. That'll be good for you."
Exactly, right? So you need good discovery questions, and the more you know of them, right? And this is going to help the customer self-discover, right? You're facilitating that. So having a one pager, like we always have, just like sort of like everything we do is a one page laminate. We're so old school, which is actually beautiful because people actually like it. It's different. It's not in their CRM. So we have a one pager for discovery, a one pager for value selling, and then a one page for negotiation. And the thing is, you can quickly go, oh, I missed that. None of us are perfect. I still use it. I've been using fairly much the same discovery questions.
And you wrote it.
And I wrote it, but I still keep it there. It's like, oh, I forgot to do that. I forgot to do this, right? We're not perfect. And if you do those consistent, repeatable things, easy, right? So I can get you 90% of the value without all this hocus pocus.
Wait, I don't need to use Gen AI and Chat GPT and large language models and blah, blah, blah to help me sell better?
I can take on any newbie and bring them up to speed really quickly. If you're analytical and have good social skills, I can make you you could become a great salesperson. All that other stuff is great. And there are things that can help you as a salesperson, craft like an email and things like that. That's all fine. That's all good. But the basic fundamental face to face is be prepared, right? What are the stuff you need to be prepared? And AI can help you be prepared, right? You can say, what should I know about Lee? Go on his LinkedIn profile, see his background, right? Just basic blocking and tackling. But it's an interactive conversation that should really help out. Otherwise, you can have AI speaking to AI and okay, they're making a decision and no one knows how this is going to work. And poor Lee gets fired because a good person gets fired because stuff didn't work.
Yeah. I'll have my bot call your bot. They can work it out.
Yeah. Have your bot hire me back. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people think of negotiation as something that has to be done. Right. Some people think that negotiation is I win, you lose. I don't get the sense, Ron, that that's your perspective.
No, and in fact, we always talk about is you want to be the buyer's number one choice. And the way you get to be the buyer's number one choice is by reducing the buyer's risk. And risk comes in two forms, business risk and personal risk. And for every decision maker, this is what I make for every deal, who's all involved in the decision-making process. And you may not be able to touch them all. You hope to. Again, you may not be able to. What's their business win from them choosing us? And what's their personal win? Okay, Lee wants to increase sales. Great. Lee's personal win is, hey, he's going to go home on the weekend and he's going to go take his sailboat out, wherever it might be, or coach his son or daughter's basketball game, or whatever it might be. So I want to make sure I have all those listed out. So it's a win-win relationship, and I actually want to make you win more. And Lee, you're going to get promoted by using our system, right? Sales are going to increase 20%. You're going to take over the Eastern region and the Western region, whatever it might be, right? And by the way, here are things that we're going to throw in to ensure that continue to lower the risk that are a dollar for discount. And one of the interesting things is people say, oh, we're going to cut you down in negotiation, rather than giving like a $10,000 discount, which doesn't lower anybody's risk.
Right.
What if we give you extra training or having, specially trained people, but now I need a 3-year commit. Right?
Wow.
Give to get.
I've been a big proponent of paying attention to the risk analysis perspective for a long time. And what you just said makes it so clear that offering that discount doesn't reduce the perceived or actual risk. It might slightly reduce the cost and maybe some very minor organizational risk or profile risk, but like it either is going to work or it's not going to work. And that discount isn't going to go, well, it didn't work, but we saved a bundle on it, so it's okay.
Lee, right? We just did, a $300,000 implementation. The whole thing failed, but Lee, you saved $10,000. Sweet. Not a career enhancing move.
Right.
You want to make sure it works and delivers the value.
Yeah. I love that focus on both the professional risk or organizational risk and personal risk, because subconsciously, in most cases, that's all that's going on in people's heads. They're sitting across the table from a salesperson or an engineer thinking, is this going to work? Will this vendor actually deliver what they're promising to deliver? Can I get this implemented on time? Am I going to get fired or promoted?
Yeah. It really comes down to, I'm going to get fired, promoted, right? Does Lee get the corporate gold star or the black eye?
Yeah. We were doing a key account planning session for a large company. I won't mention the name, but it was Dun & Bradstreet. And the CIO joined us for part of the account planning. And he went through his needs. And unfortunately, he couldn't join us in person. So he was calling in. And I was standing at a flip chart, writing down his language of value. And his language was good, better, and best. And interestingly, one of the things we found in doing our due diligence prior to that planning was he was up for several million shares of D&B if he had gotten that next generation, when he got that next generation platform fully launched. So he had a lot of personal skin in the game.
One, congratulations for uncovering it. And I always want to sell to somebody who has risk.
Yeah.
I don't want to sell to the new kid out of college, and no disrespect to early career people,
Yep.
but who has no perceived risk.
Right.
I want to sell to that seasoned executive or get to that seasoned executive who understands the risk. If this fails, this is momentous, failure.
Right.
Right. Those are the deals I want to be in. I don't want to be selling, a $10 pencil or whatever, sell me this pen. I could sell your pen better than most people.
The compensation is equivalent to the level of risk and potential impact.
Yeah. And by the way, if you ever want to know the true answer to sell me this pen is, hey, if you had this pen, what could you do with it?
What could you sign?
And how much is it worth to you? I could sell them all day long for whatever it costs.
Right.
I'm not trying to get the max value, but it's sort of, I'm just doing it efficiently. Yeah. I mean, if you're selling big things, you just want to ask questions, man.
Yep. What you're describing, Ron, is an environment in which negotiation isn't a standalone exercise. It's part and parcel of the overall relationship, even from the first conversation. When I talk with coaching clients, I say, I'm not the least expensive sales coach in town.
I love that.
You get value. You get access 24/7 if you need. I don't watch a clock. And if someone then comes back and says, I can't pay that, I'm willing to pay this, it's like, I already outlined that I'm not the least expensive. And here's the value that you get. Here's the support that you get. If that sounds good to you, that's great. And by the way, the very fact that they're asking for a discount probably has just disqualified them completely.
Yeah. And what I always think is if you give a discount, it actually hurts your credibility.
Of course.
Right. Because what does it say? It says, hey, I gave you the fake price when I thought you'd be foolish enough to accept.
Right. Pricing positioning is absolutely fascinating. We could spend a lot of time talking about just that. And that's just a small part of pricing. I always used to coach my Oracle salespeople. I would bring up Don Lehrer and I would say, Don sells educational services. I want you to put Don in every one of your deals. Why? Because when your customer gets education credits bundled in, one, it doesn't cost them anything extra. Mm-hmm. Two, more importantly, they're going to have years of support after you're gone. And they're going to be happy with our application and implementation years after you have ever talked to that customer.
Yep.
So don't do it for Don. And he always appreciated it. do it for the customer. And if the customer says, I don't want those education credits, it's like, you're just getting them because it's the right thing to do.
Understood. Love it. Absolutely love it.
A lot of salespeople want to go for the minimum viable offer. And the minimum viable offer is a pricing exercise, and it's not necessarily a risk mitigation exercise. You don't need education credits. You can figure it out.
Well, it's interesting. So we have a $600 million success story on our website, and it was by Jeff. Jeff's a super seasoned guy. We've been working on Western Digital for 30 plus years, not inexperienced. And when we talked to him about lowering the buyer's risk and selling to be the buyer's number one choice, a light went off in his mind. It was just like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So he said, I don't understand what the buyer's business risk and personal risk was. And he sells hard disk drives, and a hard disk drive can be the most commoditized product in the world if you let it, just like any product can be.
Right.
I need a 3.5-inch drive and, 500 gigabytes of data. And then what's the price?
Right.
And by really understanding the buyer's risk, hey, I couldn't afford to run out of safety stock. Hey, I need a little more robust disk drive, right? Mm-hmm. And those things are minor tweaks. More robust disk drive is very easy to create. And then, hey, let's put safety stock around all your manufacturing facilities.
Right. Hot spares. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He went from second place to first place. Mm-hmm. It's worth over $660 million. Mm-hmm. And figure 30% gross margins or 33% gross margins. That was roughly about $220 million of pure EBITDA. Mm-hmm. 10x, price EBITDA ratio. They created $2 billion worth of value on that one deal. And nice concept of risk mitigation. So if you don't know what least risk is, you're done, man.
If you don't know that having a hot spare available in 15 minutes rather than overnight shipping.
Right.
And what's the incremental cost to the vendor for that?
Right. Just storage stock, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing important, nothing major. Right. So if you're manufacturing, safety stock, always big and important. Mm-hmm. Right. If you have machine downtime, that's worth so much time. Way different than the differential of your product. Right. Right. One of our clients was a paper manufacturer. So if you get like a Blimpie sandwich, a Subway sandwich, that sandwich comes wrapped in a complete piece of their paper. Right. And there are like 12 attributes to define any piece of paper. So there's only like 1,500 companies I could sell to. They're converters. So they take that piece of paper, print like Subway or Burger King on it. What they do is they make a more perfect roll. So two things. One, there's less splice or break in it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a thin wax layer that goes on most sandwich paper.
Yeah.
And that they do a better job so it won't gunk up your machines. So what's the cost of downtime when a roll breaks? Extraordinary. What's the cost of downtime when the wax layer gunks up your operation?
Right.
The marginal difference we charge for a more perfect paper is small. And in a market that's growing 1% to 2% a year, they were able to grow 22% a year.
Mm-hmm.
Just as an example.
Right. Yeah. And that's a salesperson has to identify those business processes and engage the customer in the conversation about that. I had a key account director that used to call on McGraw-Hill because he had been in the business. He could walk around the plant and go, how come you use that printing press? When I was in the business, I used this, and instant credibility.
Yes.
Right. And not everyone comes from that business. And if you show some curiosity and you do some research and you're conversant in your clients or customers' business, risk perception goes way down.
Exactly.
Take it back to our prior conversation. This person has taken the time to learn about my business. They get a gold star for that. They get a second gold star for actually having some of the context around what we're trying to do.
Exactly. Right. So I could buy from you or 2 or 3 or 4 other competitors, or I could do nothing.
Right.
Sit tight.
Right.
Because no one crossed that finish line, or if I'm going to buy, it could be a crapshoot. Your product all looks the same. You all got the same drill bit.
Yeah. I had the experience a year ago of coaching a couple of field reps who their management at the last hour said, offer them a 20% incentive. And I'm coaching from the side and I'm saying, you know what? Do nothing is their preferred option. Dropping your shorts now, one, isn't going to pull that in, and two, it's not going to help you later.
It's a bad look, man. It's a bad look, and it just sets yourself up for bad stuff all the time. Oh, and by the way, when that person who moves from that company to a new company goes, hey, you know what they're willing to do?
Right. It was end of quarter, end of year shenanigans that it might pull in a few deals. It actually drives the risk metric up.
Yep.
Because now you're an untrusted vendor. You are someone that can't be trusted to be consistent.
And by the way, if you ever get a deal with them, what's their discount going to start with on their next deal? Minimum 20%, right? Minimum.
Yeah, that plus.
And you've just pushed out, they drop hands at end of quarter, end of year. We'll push this deal out to the end of the year, man.
Right. Ron, as always, this has been a fascinating conversation. What have we covered today? We talked about how nothing has changed in sales.
So I always think a red flag is what's new. Always what I say is there's a difference between what's new and what's new to you. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a sure sign of someone who was inexperienced. Like the new way of selling.
Right.
It really has not changed.
Right.
It's been the same for a really long time. You can things make simpler and easier, but when someone says, oh, this is new, it's the first red flag. And not just because we're old timers, we're relatively old timers. It just means, wow, that's new to you. It's like, being a baseball player and someone threw a fastball. It's like, wow, that's new. Yeah, no, it's not new. It's new to you.
Right. Yeah. People still buy from people, and they don't have to like you necessarily. They have to trust you, and you have to give them reason to believe that your product or your service can do what you say it can do. And more importantly, they have to believe that it will have impact on their business.
Yes, absolutely.
And then negotiation isn't a separate standalone thing. Okay, tomorrow at 3:00, let's negotiate.
You're negotiating through the entire sales process, and you're doing discovery through the entire sales process.
You're setting value markers, you're setting pricing markers, you're setting capability markers all through the process. I had someone say to me once, we'd like a discount. And I said, well, what would you like me to take out of the deliverable? No, we love what you've proposed. We don't want to pay so much. It's like,
And you know what? One of the things we always teach is anticipate getting squeezed on price. Look forward to it. Know it's coming. And in fact, I wanted you to be disappointedly if they don't squeeze you.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, oh, you're not squeezing me. I'm kind of disappointed. You're supposed to squeeze me. It's their fiduciary responsibility. Refocus back on value.
In that particular case, I knew that our proposal was the preferred proposal and they had the full budget available. Mm-hmm. So I held firm and we got the project.
I love it.
It felt good to say no to that requested discount.
I always believe you want to, what we always teach, we always talk about anticipate getting squeezed on price and give a polite no by refocusing back on value.
On value. Rather
than just saying no. It's like, hey, Lee, this is the price. I'll do the project correctly. I don't want to take anything out. You mentioned that, we need this implemented by August 15th. This will get you into the August 15th queue, and you're going to look like a rock star, and you'll get to spend the summers in Cape Cod.
Right. If my delta in price would make any difference with regard to the overall ROI for that project, I'm in the wrong business.
That's what I tell, right? If that is going to make the hurdle rate, forget it.
Yeah. If my 10 grand of savings is going to have a material impact on your business and with regard to this project, we've shot way low.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Understood.
That's fun, Ron. Ron, where can people find you?
You can call me if you go www.salesog as an original gangster, and it's R Hubsher at SalesOG, my name. Call me 650-520-9849. That's 650-520-9849. I pick up the phone. You can text, call, email, R Hubsher at SalesOG, and we're good to go.
Thanks, Ron. As always, it's a pleasure shooting the shit about stuff we both are passionate about, and that's helping customers with complex opportunities.
Lee, you're amazing.
Likewise, Ron. Talk soon.